Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the show that takes these really complex global topics and, well, tries to boil them down to what you really need to grasp. And today we are definitely following the money. We're going to a place that, honestly, very few people ever really look at, this incredibly secretive global bank. Our sources are claiming it's run by, get this, maybe 19 unelected elites, and their decisions. They quietly shape the financial fate of literally billions of people.
Yeah, and that institution is the Bank for International Settlements, the BIS, if you haven't heard of it. Well, that's probably exactly how they want it. It's designed that way. It sits right at the very top, the absolute apex of the whole global financial system. It is quite literally the central bank for central banks. Think about the big ones, the Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, Bank of England, Bank of Japan. The 63 largest central banks, they all belong to the BIS, and ultimately, they all sit kind of beneath it in the hierarchy.
So our mission for this deep dive is to really unpack this institution's true power, its actual reach. And we have to look at its controversial history. You really can't understand it otherwise. And figure out why its whole way of operating is just built for secrecy, which, as one source put it, turns it into a kind of shadow superpower.
That structure, that secrecy, it really dictates the power. I mean, looking at the foundational documents our sources went through, the BIS is set up deliberately to be, quote, incredibly intransparent and hard to understand. The thinking, apparently, from the early managers was something like, the few people in global finance who need to know about us, well, they'll find us. And everyone else, the public, governments even, they just did not need to know. That's the core philosophy we're dealing with here.
Okay, let's get into that power concept first, because the bank has this very specific legal status, right?
Yeah.
Which makes it almost impossible to hold accountable. It has something called sovereign immunity. What does that actually mean in practice?
It means exactly what it sounds like, unfortunately. It operates above the law. It's structured almost like its own independent country. It has its own police force, its own premises that are inviolable. No national government, no court has the legal authority to actually move against it or investigate its operations.
Like the UN or the IMF, but just for finance.
Exactly like that, but arguably even more shielded because finance is inherently less, shall we say, public-facing.
Yeah.
For all intents and purposes, the BIS is legally untouchable.
And what's really striking is the disconnect between how it looks on paper and its real influence. You look at its balance sheet, it seems, well, not small, but maybe only a tenth the size of the Fed's.
Right.
But the sources we looked at claim the power isn't really about the size of the balance sheet. It's about its unique ability to operate in total secrecy. And crucially, its alleged ability to, quote, hide money.
Yeah, that's the off-book claim that really stands out. The allegation is that the BIS is uniquely positioned globally to move and manage huge sums of money, potentially trillions completely under the radar, parking assets on its balance sheet in ways that bypass national oversight, bypass tracking.
So if you can move money that secretly, that fast, anywhere in the world,
then you're way more than just a talking shop or a simple clearinghouse. You are a powerful global financial instrument designed specifically for maximum opacity.
and that kind of function, it really says something about the mindset of the people who created it and maybe who run it now. We saw this interesting insight from a former U.S. government official, also a central banker, who was surprisingly candid. Said finance is often complicated by design.
Oh, definitely. That complexity, it serves a purpose, doesn't it? This official said that the actual training of a central banker involves learning not to explain clearly what you're going to do. You're actively trained to, quote, talk in circles.
Right, like the example they gave of Ben Bernanke dodging the simple question, are you printing money?
Exactly. The official basically confirmed it. The harder it is for the public, for politicians, to follow the policy details, the more power and operational freedom the people in charge keep for themselves.
Okay, so if this bank is designed for secrecy, designed to be legally untouchable, we absolutely have to understand where it came from. Because it certainly didn't start with a, clean record. The story kicks off way back in 1930.
It does. The BIS was originally set up, on paper at least, to help manage the absolutely crushing reparations Germany owed after World War I. It was a key piece of something called the Young Plan, basically established to administer these really complex, politically fraught international payments.
But that whole reason for being, it just evaporated almost immediately, didn't it? Before it even really got going?
Pretty much overnight, yeah. The Great Depression slammed the world economy. You had the Hoover Moratorium in 31, then the Lausanne Agreement in 32, and those basically killed the WWI reparations payments altogether. Poof! The entire official reason for the BIS's existence just vanished.
And yet it survived.
It did. And that survival, that's the revealing part. It didn't vanish because it wasn't really just about reparations. It survived because fundamentally it was built to be exactly what it became: a private, very exclusive club for central bankers.
A fortress.
A fortress, exactly, designed specifically to shield these powerful financial figures from, well, messy democratic processes, from political oversight.
And the main driver behind this vision was Montague Norman. He was head of the Bank of England back there.
That's right. Norman was apparently obsessed with creating this kind of untouchable financial citadel, operating completely outside of government control or public scrutiny.
And the scale of that ambition.
Yeah. It was captured by this American historian, Carroll Quigley.
Yes, Quigley studied these central bankers really closely. He wrote that their ultimate goal was nothing less than to create a, quote, world system of financial control in private hands, able to dominate the political system of each country.
Dominate the political system.
Yeah. He described this system as operating in a, quote, feudalistic fashion, central banks acting together, coordinating through secret agreements made at places like the BIS. Quigley explicitly said the BIS was planned as the apex, the coordinating point of that whole system.
That is just a staggering claim, that the goal was specifically to subordinate politics to private finance.
Yeah.
And the next chapter in the BIS's history really seems to underline how useful that untouchable, secretive status became, especially during wartime.
It's absolutely crucial context, yeah. During World War II, the BIS president was an American banker named Thomas McKittrick, and under him, the bank became what our sources described as a de facto arm of Nazi finance.
A de facto arm.
It wasn't subtle. Emil Pool, who was the vice president of the Nazi Central Bank, the Reich Bank, he openly called the BIS its only foreign branch.
Its only foreign branch.
Yeah.
Wow. And the bank actually helped facilitate crimes, didn't it?
Yeah.
Like the Czech gold.
That's probably the most infamous example, yes. In March 1939, right after the Nazis rolled into Czechoslovakia, they looted the Czech national gold reserves. And the BIS, it sanctioned the transfer of 23.1 tons of that stolen gold.
How could they even do that?
Sources indicate they got help, believe it or not, from the Bank of England, which apparently just stuck to formal procedures, asking no questions about where this sudden trove of gold came from. The BIS essentially laundered it, gave legitimacy to grand theft on a massive scale by processing it through their supposedly neutral book.
And this relationship with Nazi Germany deepened during the war.
Oh, yes. By 1943, sources state that an absolutely shocking 82% of the BIS's entire income was derived from handling Nazi gold. And this included gold that had been melted down, gold allegedly taken from the teeth fillings and personal property of concentration camp victims.
That's horrifying.
It's incredibly dark history. And beyond just handling the gold, the BIS served a key intelligence function, too. McKittrick apparently fed the Reich Bank regular intelligence briefings on Allied financial moves, things like U.S. war funding strategies.
So they were helping the Nazis evade financial blockades.
Effectively, yes. The intel allowed the Nazis to use the BIS to quickly pull funds out of markets before Allied blockades could hit them. It kept Nazi money liquid and largely invisible throughout the war.
It really was acting like an untouchable fortress, wasn't it? Operating
Yeah.
above the fray, even during a world war.
Completely. But that wartime conduct, that reputation, it finally led to a serious attempt to shut it down.
At Bretton Woods.
Exactly. In 1944, at the Bretton Woods Conference, the one that set up the post-war financial order, a very senior U.S. Treasury official, Harry Dexter White, stood up and demanded the BIS be abolished immediately. He called its wartime actions treasonous. And they actually passed a resolution to dissolve the BIS at the earliest possible moment, favoring the new institutions, the IMF, and the World Bank.
Okay, so the world's leaders agreed. This thing needs to go. But it's still here. It survived. How on earth did they manage that?
Well, the European central bankers, who really saw the BIS as their essential private clubhouse, they went to work. Lots of intense lobbying, all happening behind closed doors, completely away from public view or political debate. And in 1948, that Bretton Woods resolution to dissolve the BIS, it was just quietly reversed. Poof! Gone. The fortress held.
And the man who ran it during the war? President McKittrick, the American banker dealing with Nazi gold. What happened to him? Any consequences?
Absolutely none. Zero punishment. He left the BIS and immediately landed a very prestigious job as a vice president at Chase National Bank back in the U.S.
Untouchable.
Seems that way. Possibly shielded by the, quote, lifetime immunity granted under Swiss law that came with his BIS position. It just cemented this idea that the officials inside this untouchable institution are Themselves untouchable. The bank survived, and frankly, it ended up growing even more powerful in the post-war era.
Which brings us right up to today. The world's most exclusive financial club still meets. These 19 central bank governors gather every 2 months for this ritual in Basel, Switzerland.
Yeah, the ritual sounds pretty precise. They fly into Zurich, apparently treated like royalty, whisked away in limousines to the BIS headquarters, this big circular tower block in Basel. The formal meeting, the Economic Consultative Committee, kicks off in Conference Room E, usually lasts maybe 60, 90 minutes.
That's the official part. But as history suggests, the real meeting probably isn't the formal one with the note-takers, right?
Absolutely not. The key part, the true ritual, happens later. Around 9 p.m., the assistants leave, and the governors head up to the dinner on the 18th floor dining room. The setting is described as, superb food, excellent wine, very elegant but informal. And it's here, over dinner and drinks, that the global financial agenda is really shaped.
There was that quote from the former Hungarian central bank governor.
Yes, he recalled that the main topics discussed at these dinners were often, quote, the quality of the wine and the stupidity of finance ministers.
Wow. That says so much about the mindset, doesn't it? A group that sees itself as sort of above the elected officials they technically advise. But what really stands out about this whole setup is the complete lack of accountability.
It's total secrecy. The attendance list for that key committee, never released, what's discussed in that room, never repeated publicly, not even shared reliably with their own country's finance ministers back home.
Yeah.
The bank even has the legal right to communicate in encrypted code, just like an embassy. It creates this policy black box completely outside any kind of democratic check or balance.
Okay, so this brings us to the critical question for you listening right now. Why should you actually care about some fancy dinner happening on the 18th floor of a tower in Switzerland?
You should care, because these unelected officials, whose salaries are ultimately paid by the public in their home countries, they are the ones steering the global economy. They're setting the direction for your interest rates, the terms of your mortgage, the stability or lack thereof of your savings. Their decisions directly impact your financial life. And if they're making these calls, coordinating their approaches in total secrecy, well, they're shaping the global economic narratives that affect everyone.
Think about that inflation is transitory line that absolutely dominated the conversation in 2021, early 2022.
Right.
Our sources strongly suggest it's highly probable that that specific narrative, the one that maybe kept central banks from raising rates sooner, was discussed, maybe even agreed upon, as the public line in that secret dining room.
It's like institutional groupthink, but without any public pushback or consequences for getting it wrong.
And while the rest of the world is still dealing with the fallout from that high inflation, the BIS, well, it's already laser-focused on the next big frontier, which they seem to view as securing, potentially, absolute control over the financial system itself.
Yeah, this pivot really accelerated during the pandemic, didn't it? Suddenly, physical cash felt, dirty, dangerous, obsolete. That fear created the perfect environment, the perfect opening for promoting a seamless, totally traceable alternative. Central bank digital currencies, CBDCs.
And let's be clear, CBDCs are not like Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies, right?
Not at all. These are digital tokens, basically just numbers on a screen issued directly by the central bank. They are programmable, they are completely trackable, and the record is permanent.
Proponents talk about the upsides of avoiding bank fees, faster international transfers.
Sure, there are potential convenience arguments, but the real game changer, the thing that makes central bankers so interested, is the potential for centralization and, crucially, control.
And the BIS is right there at the forefront, isn't it?
Yeah.
Driving this global shift.
Absolutely. It's overseeing the whole process through its dedicated innovation hub. They're running numerous major CBDC pilot programs with central banks all over the world.
And the scale of this is huge. We need to grasp that. Over 130 countries right now.
Representing something like 98% of global GDP are actively exploring or piloting CBDCs, often with direct backing or guidance from the BIS and the IMF.
And this is where that serious concern raised in our source material comes sharply into focus, the potential trade-off between that convenience and, well, control.
Exactly. One source expressed a deep worry that a CBDC, especially if it's integrated with a digital ID system and widespread surveillance tech, could lead to unintended, maybe very negative consequences.
The source used the politically charged phrase, digital concentration camp. Now, we're not endorsing that specific language, but the underlying technical concern is about potentially creating a system where every single financial transaction you make is visible in real time to the state.
And look, this isn't just speculation from critics. The central bankers themselves are surprisingly open about the control aspect. It's not just about efficiency for them. It's about the technology of enforcement. We actually found a direct quote from a senior figure involved in CBDC development.
It was pretty blunt, wasn't it?
Incredibly so. The quote was, "A key in with the CBDC is that central bank will have absolute control on the rules and regulations that will determine the use of that expression of central bank liability.
Okay, absolute control on the rules.
And also, we will have the technology to enforce that absolute control rule."
The technology to enforce that absolute control rule. Wow.
That phrase, absolute control rule, that's the core of it. They are consciously designing a system where financial rules aren't just laws on paper. They can be embedded into the currency itself and enforced automatically, instantaneously. Now, link that capability back to the ambition Carol Quigley described almost a century ago.
Creating a system of private financial control to dominate the political system.
Right. You start to wonder if the BIS, after all these years, might finally be getting the technological tool it needs to achieve that level of truly global, potentially dominant control.
So, wrapping up this deep dive, what does it all mean for you? What's the takeaway? Well, we've seen the BIS is this institution that survived an attempt to abolish it, even after its deep entanglement with Nazi finance during the war. It not only survived, it grew much more powerful, all while keeping that untouchable legal status, that fortress of secrecy. It's moved from secretly managing World War I debts to now secretly designing the global architecture for the future of digital money.
And remember, central banks always claim they're independent, right? But their actions, their history, show they aren't really neutral, and they certainly aren't elected. Yet their power seems to grow with every crisis they navigate, every new technology they embrace. So if the BIS and its member central banks actually achieve this stated goal of absolute control over the currency itself through CBDCs, the real question maybe isn't just what they control anymore.
It's who are they controlling? Well, something to definitely mull over as you think about the global financial infrastructure being built right now, often in secret, and what it might mean for your own privacy, your own financial freedom down the road. We'll see you on the next deep dive.